This week, Toby and I bring you the latest in film and TV news of the week, including the 77th annual BAFTAs. We also bring you our thoughts on Sony's latest film within its cinematic universe, Madam Web. Stay listening for our discussion. Hello, and welcome back to the Collab Podcast. I'm here as always with Toby Yeomans.
Yes, sir.
And my name is Will Frost, and we're here to discuss all things film and TV. How are you, Toby?
I'm good. I've been watching some things this week, trying to keep up with some of the news that's coming out. So very excited to talk about some of that stuff today. How about yourself?
I'm good. I think there's been a lot of news this week. A lot of stuff to do. It's been busy, and I'm really, really excited to get into it all with you. I think we should start off by saying that we've had a lot of feedback and support from the first episode of the show.
Yeah.
It's meant a lot to us. A lot of our friends and family have really given us a lot of feedback, and we've appreciated it, and we hope that this episode is better than the last, because we always want to improve. And we go into a lot more detail on things, and we also tone back on a lot of things, because we realized the last episode was a long one.
Very, very long one, yeah.
A long one. But it was a massive week in film. I mean, the Super Bowl weekend is always huge.
Yeah.
And this week has been, I'd say, equally as big, but not in the same way. There's not a lot of announcements and trailers, but it's big awards time with the BAFTAs.
Yeah. To our credit, there was a lot of news to talk about. We did yap a little bit.
We did.
Went on a couple of tangents that were perhaps unnecessary, but not bad for the first attempt. And we'll try and condense it down, give you guys our opinions, the news as necessary, but keep it interesting and shorter if possible.
We also hope you guys really like the new design of the podcast. We've had a fantastic designer by the name of George Margaritas create our new logo and design for the podcast. And of course, the music has been completed by Sophie Frost, and we greatly appreciate their support of the show. And we can't wait to keep making it more and more professional and get a wider audience for the show.
No, they did fantastic for that.
We like to start the podcast by going through some of the things that we saw this week, some of the movies and TV shows we've watched. I think you and I watch a wide variety of film and TV.
Yeah.
And I just thought we could go into our thoughts to start off the podcast. So, Toby, what have you watched this week?
Well, I'll start with a bit of a niche one. I finished watching the 1997 Berserk anime. So for anyone who has seen that, I'm very sorry to you, because it is very intense. But I also did watch Arrival this week.
Oh, great film.
For the first time. I had some thoughts, but I'm sure we'll talk about that another day when we're talking about, what's the director's name?
Denis Villeneuve.
Yes,
we should plug that in the lead up to June Part 2, which we're both very excited for. We are going to do a Denis Villeneuve conversation and go through some of his filmography, which, I mean, he is my favorite director.
Yeah.
He has produced some of my favorite films. He's a massive inspiration for me, and I'm really excited to know that you're going through some of his old filmography.
Yes,
and I can't wait to get into it one day.
Yeah, try and catch up a little bit there. So that's what I've been watching this week. What have you been?
I've been going through the X-Men films.
Yeah.
In the build up to Deadpool 3, I realized that I hadn't revisited the X-Men films in a long time. So I revisited, at the moment, First Class and Days of Future Past.
Yep.
I think Days of Future Past, it's really good.
Yeah.
As in, it would be a solid 8 out of 10 at the moment.
Okay.
First Class went down a bit for me.
Yeah.
Actually, upon revisiting it, it's a great film, but it doesn't age as well as I think Days of Future Past does.
Yeah. Okay, I can see that.
And I am really excited to go through the other ones. I'm going through chronologically.
Yeah.
So I will be going back to some of the old original ones.
Yeah.
But I'm really excited to keep going with those in the build up to Deadpool 3.
Yeah.
So I've been watching those, and I just completed Mr. and Mrs. Smith, as you know, the new Amazon Prime TV show, which we'll be going into more detail on later in this podcast.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
So shall we get on to the news for this week, Toby?
Yeah, we can get started with that. Do you want to start talking about guess what Nolan's been up to recently? I mean, obviously he's still very popular with Oppenheimer running circles in the Oscars currently.
Absolutely. He's been on a massive marketing and Oscars campaign at the moment. I mean, he did the promo with, is it Stephen Colbert? He did the they recreated the final scene and did a little skit on that.
Yeah.
And he's also been doing a lot of work. Obviously, I mean, he's winning all the awards everywhere he's going at the moment. So he's doing a lot of publicity, a lot of press. He did some major interviews, and some of the stuff we're going to talk about is some of the things he said.
Yeah. So he said some funny things. One of the things that I
sure.
saw that I thought was really funny was he confessed he was a fan of the Fast and Furious franchise.
Who isn't, Toby? Who isn't a fan of the Fast and Furious franchise? Come on.
No, I look. I think it's funny. Even the interviewer was kind of like taken aback by like Nolan, who's like this very cinematic and I don't know what the right word to describe him in comparison to like the Fast and Furious franchise.
He's a complex filmmaker. He plays with time. He plays with characters and memories and dreams and these completely outlandish, complex ideas. And what he actually likes is Vin Diesel driving a Mustang.
For family.
Yeah, for family, exactly.
No, it's it's
who doesn't like that?
I'll stand by a couple of the Fast and Furious films. I'll even stand by saying the first one is like a genuinely good film. Some of the later ones.
Yeah, I think they're fun up to 8. 8 I enjoy enough. 9 and 10 I really struggle watching. I really struggle to watch those. They go. I mean, going to space quite literally was a joke that the internet was throwing around, and they thought, yeah, let's do that.
We had a good time watching 9.
We had a very good time watching. I mean, we had a few drinks for our listeners, and then went in to see Fast and Furious 9, and it's safe to say we had a great time.
Yeah, that was much better that way. But one of the other things that Nolan has said that I think is particularly interesting to me is that he would be interested in making a horror movie. Do you want to
horror movie?
Tell me a little bit about that one.
I do. So he said it at the British Film Institute that it's a project he would love to tackle.
Yeah.
And I've sort of said this for a long time, and people, I feel like don't quite understand what I mean. Because people, when they think of a horror film, they think of Halloween, Scream, these traditional slashers and jump scares, and usually something about exorcisms or zombies or something like that, right? But I genuinely think Oppenheimer is one of the most terrifying films I've seen in recent memory.
That's a good way of saying. Yes, I think conceptually it's terrifying. I think that
exactly.
I mean, also because it very much happened. It's a biopic.
Exactly.
It's terrifying to think that that's something that the world went through, and there was like a legitimate fear of ending the world. I guess that's war for you. But I think even horror as just a thematic like genre, it's not underutilized. I feel like it's underappreciated to a certain extent. You know how much I love Jordan Peele's movies.
Absolutely.
Like, bordering horror thriller, but his films are brilliant.
Yeah.
Convey some really important messages and stuff like that. But I love horror as a genre. I think it's got so much potential, and I would really like to see what Nolan's gonna go for in that theme. I think it'll be really interesting.
Yes, I completely agree.
Maybe he does Scream 7 or something. We'll see.
I mean, as much as I would love to see his take on that stuff, I would love to see Nolan do a Fast and Furious film. That's what I want to see next.
That's fair.
Vin Diesel going back in time or something. That's what I want to see.
Oh God, I couldn't deal with it.
But I'd be very curious to see him take on a horror film, and I know he has the creative ability for it. I mean, he's proved that from every one of his films, but especially Oppenheimer, where he creates this atmosphere that is absolutely terrifying. As I said before, I mean, horror is a lot about atmosphere and tone as much as it is about, making sure that there's a quick edit and, you're scared. Because whilst that stuff is absolutely important and works within a subgenre of horror, there is certain work that Jordan Peele does and other incredible horror filmmakers that it's about atmosphere, it's about tone.
Yeah.
And it's this feeling of fear that you have, and not this every now and again your heart rate goes up because someone scares you.
Yeah, it's that dread, I think, is one of the good way to describe it.
Totally.
But talking about obviously Oppenheimer and the Oscars run that is currently going on. Jimmy Kimmel, who I believe is hosting the Oscars this year,
he is.
Released a trailer for it. It was Barbie themed. It had Kate McKinnon, American Ferrera, sorry.
Yep.
And Ryan Gosling appear in it. What did you think of it?
Oh, I enjoyed it. I think every year, I mean, last year he did, well, I guess it was last year, but the film came out the year before, but it was Top Gun Maverick. And that was really fun. And I love it when they bring in some of the stars and they sort of do a bit of a comedy element in relation to some of these films. And I personally really enjoyed it. I think I preferred the Top Gun one because I think the idea of this mission that he has to achieve, which is to host the Oscars, is a bit more fun. I love how they played with the element of Barbie and him escaping Barbie Land to go host the Oscars.
Yeah.
I'll run you through some of my favorite moments. One of them was how they made fun of Paul Giamatti getting the In-N-Out burger and how there's now a trend of celebrities not eating at these events and going out for a burger afterwards.
Yeah, that was Ryan Gosling, of course. He appeared for that.
Of course. I also enjoyed how they they screamed about the critical snub of Greta Gerwig.
Yeah.
And how she was not nominated for a Best Director role. And I thought it was quite out there of the trailer to actually point out someone who didn't get nominated and not people who did get nominated, whilst of course they do reference people who did. It is I don't know if I've ever seen that where they spoke about someone who wasn't nominated in such a major way in the trailer.
Yeah. I'm not sure how the Academy saw it, perhaps. I mean, not to say that there wasn't people who are being awarded who didn't deserve it, but yeah, I think Greta and what she did with Barbie was fantastic, and I definitely think it's a shame to not even see her nominated. But yeah, I thought the trailer in itself, it was corny. And I understand it's probably meant to be. But that was even the same. I went and watched the one from last year, the Top Gun themed one as well. The same thing. I thought they were both very corny. But yeah, I don't think it does all that much beyond just introduce Jimmy Kimmel to be hosting it.
Exactly.
So in that sense, it did its job. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how he does perform. But yeah, I think the Oscars will be a pretty clear run for Oppenheimer, to be entirely honest.
I agree. It's just fun to have little moments like this in the build up to the Oscars, because I feel like they're trying to appeal it to a wider audience than just hardcore cinephiles who've seen every single film, a bit like us. But I do think they're trying to appeal it to a mass audience, and this is a good way of doing it. A bit of a fun skit. It's going to go viral on YouTube and social media. People are going to give it a watch, have a laugh, and be like, maybe I'll check it out this year.
Yeah.
There's some more news coming out this week with Apple TV's new series Masters of Air. This is one I've seen multiple episodes of. I think I'm one behind. But it has now become the most watched series launch for Apple TV+. So this is coming up against a lot of major TV shows that they had. And following the premiere of the series, viewership rose by 65%. And I think this comes down to a lot of really positive press about it. It's getting good enough reviews. It's not being widely claimed, but it's getting a lot of good reviews.
Yep.
I really enjoyed it. I think it's good for what it is, and it's got some great performances by major stars such as Austin Butler.
Yep.
And it's good to see that it's getting a lot of viewership. And it looks like Apple TV is only adding more and more quality content to its service, including Killers of the Flower Moon being on Apple TV Plus now.
Of course. Isn't was it Napoleon?
Napoleon is also an Apple TV production.
Yeah, I can't say I've actually watched too much Apple TV content in general. Of course, watched Ted Lasso.
That's incredible.
Everyone loves Ted Lasso. I think my parents have gone through it 3 or 4 times now.
So have I. It's an amazing
ridiculous
TV show.
No, it's good fun. But yeah, I think Apple TV is getting a good catalog behind it. So it'll be interesting to see how it's competing with the other streaming services.
Absolutely. This week we've also had a new trailer for Alex Garland's film Civil War release. As Toby knows, this is one I'm really anticipating. I think it was a really, really good trailer and has the potential to be a very interesting film.
Yeah.
So it stars Kirsten Dunst in the lead role, and it's expected on April 12th, 2024, and it will be an IMAX release.
Yes, you're excited about the IMAX?
I am excited about the IMAX. I feel like films that have this deeper level than just showy action, such as Oppenheimer and Tenet and some of these other films that we've gotten in IMAX.
Yeah.
I really like when they bring films like that to the big screen and you get to completely delve into a story that is complex but visually stunning as well.
I feel like I don't want to criticize you too much. I feel like you're jumping to say that it's going to be a very complex film. From the trailer, it doesn't show all that much story to it. I'm not saying that they want to reveal the entire plot of the film, but from what I saw, it was just showy action thus far.
I know what you mean, but I think looking at the cast and the crew and Alec Garland wrote the film as well.
Yeah.
I know it's A24 as well. We always got to remember that. And they don't go for showy action adventure films. They're normally more independent productions. They appeal to more of a niche audience.
Yeah.
They get critically acclaimed within a niche audience. And as we've seen with last week's film that we spoke about, The Iron Claw, they've always got a lot of heart to them. They've always got something to say, and I feel like Civil War will live up to that.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Despite the trailer not going into a lot, but I feel like that's part of it. It's a film that's going to have a lot to say, and they don't want to give all that away.
Yeah, I'm not going to avoid the film just because it looks like an action film. I think the action, from what I saw, looked pretty well choreographed at the very least. So, but yeah, I think it's hard to judge a film when you don't know the plot of it, obviously. That's not to say that you necessarily want to know it going in. But yeah, no, definitely something that I would recommend to go see. April 12th it releases, just to reiterate that. IMAX, if you really want to experience the big screen.
Which you do.
Of course.
You do.
Of course.
Our listeners do want to experience that in IMAX. They have to.
Yeah.
Just on some other news that is very recent, but it won't appeal to many people. But for those of you that do, will be, I think, very interested in this. This is some of the biggest news we've gotten in terms of physical media in a long time. And again, I know I've lost half of the listeners now. But for those who do still care, or those who are at least interested in outside of streaming film distribution, Disney has reached a license deal with Sony Home Entertainment for DVD and Blu-ray. So Sony will handle all physical media releases by Disney. So any of the new films, any of its catalogs, will be released by Sony and not Disney on Home Entertainment. So this shows that Disney is completely focused on its streaming service and theater releases. But Sony will market, sell, and distribute all new Disney releases in the US and Canada. So unfortunately, Australians will still likely have to import everything, but we do that now anyway. But it's very interesting because Sony have famously had really good physical media releases. They do a lot of incredible 4K releases as well, and I've purchased a lot of stuff that they've released. So I'm very interested in this. I want to see if Sony really put a lot of work into it. I feel like Disney releases at home are massive. Even some of the Marvel films that haven't been wildly successful, they do sell at home because people want to maintain their collection. People want to own the MCU. So I think if Sony does something really special with this, give us lots of special features, director's commentaries, things that real cinephiles care about that you can't get on streaming, people will buy it.
I feel disturbed whenever you call people cinephiles.
I know, it's not the nicest of names. Film fans. We'll call it film fans.
Yeah.
I know that that's quite a niche news story, but it's something that I'm quite excited about and will be very curious to see how that goes for us.
And another niche one that some people might be interested in is Borderlands has just shown the first look at some of the cast in costume. And anyone who knows Borderlands, video game franchise, pretty good game if you want to play it.
Yeah, big franchise.
But from what we can see from the screenshots here, the characters look fantastic, I'm going to say.
They do.
And you got some big names in the cast as well. You got Kevin Hart, Bobby Lee, Kate Blanchett, Jamie Lee Curtis, and Jack Black.
Do you think this is going to be a comedy then?
Yes.
I'm looking at Kevin Hart and Jack Black going, but is it an MA?
Have you played Borderlands before?
So one of them. I think it was Borderlands 3.
Yeah, Borderlands 3.
Yeah, 3.
It's a good game. So it does have like comedy elements.
It does, but it's quite
graphic. Gory. I'm not sure if they will make it like maybe an M film. I'm hoping that it'll be like a bit more mature because
I feel like that's the audience of the games.
Yeah, the audience of the games definitely, because it has lots of blood splatter, like intense themes and stuff like that.
Pretty gory game.
Yeah. But I'm excited for it. I think it could be a bit of fun. And some big names behind it as well, which seems like random, but obviously it's not going to be a small little video game film. It's going to be a big blockbuster, I imagine.
And it's coming out with a lot of other video game adaptations too, with Fallout also having some set pictures that came out a few weeks and months ago. But it looks like we're going to get more adaptations of film franchises, obviously.
Game franchises. There is another one as well, which I don't have it written down anywhere, but there is news. Anyone that knows about, I think it's called Iron Lung, Markiplier.
I've never heard of this.
Markiplier, very famous YouTuber, is making a film called Iron Lung. It's based off an indie video game. It's meant to be like a very claustrophobic, Fear of the Ocean type film.
Oh, wow.
I'm not sure how it will be. I think Markiplier is set to direct in it, which will be interesting. Or the less, but I'm excited to hear about it because the game is good. It's creepy. It's an indie game, so it's not too like detailed, but the atmosphere that it builds is really good. So that's another one you can look out for video game wise. I'm sure I'll get back to you if there's any more news that I hear about, but that was just something that I thought about when we're talking about video game films coming out.
To make a crazy segue to another completely unrelated topic, but we actually missed it last week and I thought it was worth mentioning on the pod, was that Godzilla vs. Kong had a second trailer
Oh,
actually
exciting.
released. So we've all seen the one that's come out in theaters and IMAX and all that. But they did reveal another one that had a bit more details on the plot.
Okay.
So from what I can gather from the trailer, and again, they don't go into a lot of details, but they do mention a few things. And it looks like a child has the ability to sense this message that's being sent by the villain of the film. And the creatures, Kong and Godzilla, can also sense this message. And they kind of reveal in it that it's a call to war, essentially. We don't know why, but it seems that there is some kind of build-up to this massive power that is going to come to be, and that Godzilla, Kong, and this girl can sense it, and that's how the humans sort of get involved, because they come to learn a bit from this girl.
Yeah.
And it's also revealed that the humans built they built Kong the
Infinity Gauntlet.
Infinity Gauntlet. We don't know what to call it, but the Infinity Gauntlet to help them fight this creature that
Bumblebee's
is yet to be revealed. But yeah, so it'll be interesting. I think the second trailer wasn't as good as the first, in that I think the first showcased the visuals and built up some excitement on seeing these two characters return with Kong and Godzilla.
Yep.
But I mean, we always knew the plot was going to be outlandish.
Big monsters fight.
And that's all I want. I'm happy to see big monsters fight. I wasn't a big fan of Godzilla vs. Kong, and I didn't love Godzilla 2, but I really enjoyed the 2014 Godzilla, and I do enjoy Kong Skull Island.
Yep.
So they have the ability to make a really good film.
Yes.
And that is dumb popcorn entertainment.
Do you think it's one of those things where it's easier to keep the monsters, the stated monsters in like their own separate categories, where it's like with the second that you drew in like Kong versus Godzilla, it makes it very difficult to write
yes,
like good script, I suppose.
Yes, because if I'm going to say one of my favorite ones, as the two I've just mentioned, but also Godzilla -1.
Yes.
Again, just Godzilla. But the thing about Godzilla -1 is I think that is actually going to harm the release of Godzilla vs. Kong, because we've seen Godzilla done in an insanely well done manner. And the thing is, I don't mean from a box office point of view, but I mean critically, people have seen Godzilla action and Godzilla spectacle that has real human heart, a believable story. I think that people are going to be more critical of the plot and the story of Godzilla vs. Kong.
You reckon? I reckon it's going to be like maybe people who actually went and saw Godzilla -1. I don't think a huge amount of like the MonsterVerse watchers were necessarily going to see -1, or not in the same sense of like when they're going to see a monster film, they want to watch big lizard fight big monkey, versus when you go see -1, it's a story about like grappling with the end of World War II as a Japanese kamikaze pilot.
But you don't think people want to revisit that over something that they now understand? Like, we've seen on a very small budget Godzilla action that looks incredibly good. I mean, he's been nominated for Best VFX at the Oscars. And Godzilla vs. Kong, don't get me wrong, it'll probably look 10 times better in terms of CGI and scale. But everything I wanted from a Godzilla action and visual point of view was upheld in Godzilla -1, and it had a human story that I believed in and enjoyed. And that's not to say I'm not going to enjoy Godzilla vs. Kong, especially me. I'm going to go watch it, as I'm sure everyone will. I don't think it's going to be a box office flop. But what I'm saying is I think people may be a little bit more critical, and now they're not just going, oh, well, the story won't matter, because they never get it right in a creature film anyway.
Yeah, I don't know.
I just feel like when people have seen something that is done everything they want in a Godzilla film, done well, and a human story that people believe in, they might be a little bit more harsh on the MonsterVerse for not going in a direction like that.
I mean, we can always hope that audiences hold studios to high standards when they have huge budgets, massive CGI. They can still make a fantastic story through that. I'm always advocating for that. I don't know necessarily if audiences hold the same standards, even after a fantastic film like -1 came out. But yeah, we can always hope, is my final word on that one there.
And after we see Godzilla vs. Kong, I'm sure we'll give you a ranking of the MonsterVerse franchise and all our thoughts on all of the films and how it compares to those. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see whether it lives up to, for me, the 2014 Godzilla, which I know is a controversial choice, but I think that's incredibly well made. But all of the films in the MonsterVerse franchise. So we're going to go on to our major news of the week, which was that the BAFTAs was held in London. It was held on the 18th of February, and it was pretty much what we expected.
Yeah, as I have said and expected from the Oscars, mostly a wash for Oppenheimer. Poor Things did fantastic as well.
It did
and
very
I'm happy
well.
To see
it
that.
did very well.
In animated films, we can talk about The Boy and the Heron. Won the BAFTA for that. Absolutely deserved. Miyazaki, his final film, brilliant. I loved it. I know you still haven't seen it.
I haven't seen The Boy and the Heron.
No, but I think it is a film that even if you're not a huge fan of Japanese animation, it's a very emotional and heartfelt film that is definitely worthwhile to watch.
Absolutely. Let me run you through some of the winners of the BAFTAs and chime in if you have any thoughts on these. But of course, starting off with Best Film, it went to Oppenheimer.
Yes.
I think that's also a done deal for the Oscars. There's a potential there's some other ones that could come in. I think Poor Things and The Holdovers have the potential.
Yes, yeah.
But I do think that Oppenheimer is the winner here. We've also got outstanding British film was The Zone of Interest, which is getting critically acclaimed across the world. People are really enjoying that film. I've heard it's a tough watch, but really powerful.
Yeah.
We've got outstanding debut by British writer, director, or producer. We've got Earth Mama. And then film not in the English language, we have The Zone of Interest. So those are some of the ones that won. To continue, we have 20 Days in Mariupol, winning Best Documentary. Of course, as Toby just mentioned, The Boy and the Heron winning Best Animated Feature. Do you think that was a worthy win? Because we do have another massive animated film that came out last year, which was obviously Across the Spider-Verse.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a worthy win?
Absolutely. I think Miyazaki has been snubbed in his awards. I think he's made some brilliant films that have been beaten by some mediocre animations.
Spirited Away win?
No, Spirited Away didn't win.
Did it
I
not
don't
win?
believe
Okay,
so.
That's a snub.
And anyone who's seen Spirited Away knows it's a fantastic film. One of my favorites.
I mean, it's. I have not watched a lot of anime, but that made me go, if this is what anime can be.
Yes, yeah. Look, I think I don't want to set your standards that high. There's obviously some worse ones out there, but it is obviously Miyazaki's brilliant in what he does. Compared to Into the Spider-Verse, it's some of the same criticism that you said last week, is that it seems like kind of an incomplete film. I think when Part 2 comes out and it's brilliant, which I'm assuming it will be, it might do better off. But since it's Miyazaki's final film, very complete story, I think it just performs better as a standalone film.
Yeah, I think it's easily this tie between The Boy and the Heron and Across the Spider-Verse that it's one or. And at the moment, The Boy and the Heron has just dominated across the awards. I think it also comes down to the award ceremonies have not been kind to superhero films in the past, and I do think that makes a massive difference.
Well, the original Spider-Verse won, didn't it? Did not win Oscar for Best Animation?
I think it a Globe. It may have won a Globe.
Okay.
I can't remember, but it may have won a Globe.
I feel like it may have. I can always check.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you that superhero films in general have been overlooked.
Yeah.
Not to say that all superhero films are deserving of Oscars. I don't want to give too much
but I
credit
think
to
the fact that The Dark Knight wasn't nominated for Best Picture is
ridiculous, yeah.
Ridiculous.
But Heath Ledger obviously got the Oscar for his performance.
It's just not often you see a Best Actor
No.
not have their film nominated for Best Picture. It's just not very common for that
That's
to
true.
happen.
Yep.
We also, continuing on, we have Oppenheimer winning Best Director.
Yep.
And then we have Best Original Screenplay winning for Anatomy before winning for that.
Yep.
To continue, I'll just sort of run through these. Feel free to chime in. But adapted screenplay, we have American Fiction, leading actress Emma Stone.
Then I think Emma Stone's performance was fantastic.
Absolutely. I think Lily Gladstone still has a chance for the Oscars. Her Oscars campaign has been sort of viewed quite widely across all the award ceremonies. Yep. Leading actor, Cillian Murphy, of course. I do think Paul Giamatti is also got potential for the Oscars, but I do think at the moment, Cillian Murphy is the front runner. Best Supporting Actress, I mean, Divide Join Randolph. I mean, that was going to happen. Her performance in The Holdovers is remarkable. Yep. And speaking of the performances in The Holdovers, Best Casting went to The Holdovers. Cinematography, Oppenheimer, of course. Editing, Oppenheimer. Production design, Poor Things.
Yeah, very well deserved.
Absolutely. I think the next few are very well deserving for Poor Things, but costume design, Poor Things, makeup and hair, Poor Things, special visual effects, Poor Things. They had some great practical sets. Sound, The Zone of Interest. I've heard that is one for the ages in terms of sound design, is The Zone of Interest. British short film, we have Crab Day. Sorry, short animation, Crab Day. And British short film, we have Jellyfish and Lobster. And then we have the Rising Star Award being awarded to Mia McKenna Bruce, who, for those of you who don't know, she recently starred in How to Have Sex, which released last year. It was a major film in the indie realm in England, and I've heard it's a phenomenal film that I'm really curious to check out. I don't think we've had a release here yet.
No.
But she also starred in Persuasion in 2022 as well. So that was the BAFTAs. I don't think there were any big surprises for that. I don't think there were any awards that I think were undeserving.
No, well, the only one that I would maybe talk about is special visual effects. Oppenheimer versus Poor Things. What are you thinking? I think obviously Nolan's very well known for his use of practical effects.
Yes, but I think Oppenheimer hasn't been spoken about much in terms of its visual effects. I disagree with that.
Yeah.
But I also know that it's quite a condensed category this year, in that there's a lot in there. There's only so many nominations that you can give, and only so many awards you can give out. But I think if I'm going to say what's the best part of Oppenheimer, whilst I think that's up there, I think it's more deserving of other categories, and I would absolutely not turn an eye to the fact that Poor Things
not disappointed that Poor Things won it at all.
No. And I think that we know that film was brilliant, and it's deserving all these awards that it's getting, especially with Oppenheimer. Could easily do a clean sweep through most of these categories. I'm really glad that films such as The Holdovers and Poor Things are getting a lot of recognition for some of the amazing performances and work in those films.
Yeah, of course.
Welcome to the next segment of the show. We're going to be discussing Madam Web. We just got home from seeing it, and I think we have a lot of thoughts on it. Toby?
Yeah, certainly have a lot of thoughts on it. Why don't we start talking about like the objective things? We'll talk about the box office, marketing. I know you've done a bit of research on that, and then we'll get to our opinions a little bit more.
Yeah. So in regards to the box office, its domestic earnings are 26 million USD.
Yeah.
So for context, that's not a lot. That is really not a lot for a major superhero film.
No.
Look, you'd hope that you'd reach 50 minimum. 26 is really bad.
Yeah.
It is reached nearly 52 million worldwide. I mean, you want around 50 domestic.
Yeah.
Right? So it's done poorly, unfortunately. It's done poorly. In its opening weekend, it was well below that of Morbius, which is obviously the film that came before this in terms of the Sonyverse, the universe they're trying to create. That earned 39 million in its opening weekend. Madam Web earned 17.6 million.
Yeah.
So not just a little bit less, it earned a lot
I
less.
think something you got to mention as well is the budget was 80 million.
Yes.
So given they're making what, a quarter of that in their domestic.
Yeah.
That is abysmal, essentially.
I mean, I hate to say this, but it's the definition of it's failed. It really has. I mean, you're aiming to reach your you're aiming to achieve your budget within at least the first week, because you're hoping that's when everyone's going. I mean, I'm sure the opening day has triple the amount of people that are going to be there a few days after, which is when we're seeing it.
Yeah.
And we had 4 people in the whole thing.
And one walked out.
And one person walked out. So, look, we're not here to talk about cinema negatively unless it's true or that's how it is.
Not trying to like ridicule the creators of it or anything like that. It's just, it's disappointing to see the film bomb in such a manner. It's disappointing to see the studio fail. Like, I don't want people to feel like, not people, but the studio, a lot of creators to feel like they're risking, a $60 million loss in creating a film like this. But yeah, they they've essentially bombed.
They have
not done well. But one of the interesting things that I find with that is that obviously not many people are going to see it. A lot of people have opinions online about this film.
I agree. I think people are judging it based on clips and trailers that, that depict a certain version of the film, but not what you see on screen.
No.
And, people going around giving negative reviews even though they haven't seen it is part of the negative press that this is getting. Obviously, people who've seen the film are completely entitled to give their opinion, and critics are giving their opinions, and it's people are being honest about how they feel about it. But I've been in conversations with people who've given their views, and they don't really know who Madame Web is. And I think that's part of this, the negative publicity, because the marketing campaign has been shocking in regards to what the film's about. So I'm going to make a segue into the marketing of the film, which is, I think, a major contributor to the awful box office that it's had. So the film has obviously been widely criticized. Dakota Johnson has confirmed that the film went through major script changes and heavy editing last minute. The first trailer of the film kind of went viral online for the line, "He was in the Amazon with my mum when she was researching spiders right before she died."
It needs some commas.
That's an actual line from the trailer, people. That was not in the final film. We can confirm that is not actually in the film. But let me just repeat it, and let's try and break down what it means. He was in the Amazon with my mum when she was researching spiders right before she died. So we get what she's trying to say there. There is clearly a character
who was in the
knew
Amazon.
her mum, who was in the Amazon researching spiders.
The mum was
before
researching.
her mum died.
The mum was researching.
The mum was researching spiders.
And then the mum died.
You can see why people who watch this trailer are left with a bad taste in their mouth.
Yeah.
There is not a lot that gives, and it's essentially exposition dump because there's not a lot to the story.
There was a story?
Look, on top of that by itself, which that went viral, I'm sure many of you have heard that, but Dakota Johnson was also not able to name any of the Tom Holland Spider-Man films. Now, whether that was a jokey meme publicity stunt, we don't know. She may know, because everyone judges people in these interviews and on these marketing campaigns. But what we don't realize is everything is calculated. All those questions are agreed to before the actors step on.
Yeah.
So for all we know, that was a stunt by Sony to get more views, which was, let's get Johnson to say, the Goblet of Spider-Man, because that's funny. And it is funny, but it also paints the picture that the cast and crew have no idea about anything in the wider context of the film. On top of that, Dakota Johnson also posted a photo of an article revealing her casting as Madame Web, as you would if you're in a major film like that. But she tags Marvel Studios in the picture. Now, Marvel Studios aren't actually involved in this production. It's in association with Marvel Comics because that's where the character comes from. But Marvel Studios are not part of this. This isn't an MCU film. Kevin Feige's not on this film. And unfortunately, Sydney Sweeney did the same thing, but both those posts have now been taken down.
Yeah.
And all the social media posts since have just been tags with Sony Pictures, who are the studio who made this film. Look, the marketing campaign was majorly criticized, and I think a lot of people were not keen to go see this film given all the stuff that came out about it. But let's get into the film. Let's talk about our thoughts on it. So it came out this year. It stars Dakota Johnson, Sydney Sweeney, Isabella Merced, Emma Roberts, and Adam Scott. It is directed by S.J. Clarkson. And at the moment, it's not got the highest in terms of critical acclaim. It is on 13% on Rotten Tomatoes, 3.8 on IMDb, and 27 on Metacritic. I want to talk about the director before we start talking about the film, to give context, because a lot of people won't know who S.J. Clarkson is. So her previous films include the 2010 film Toast. But she's been a major TV director. That is where she's come from. She has directed episodes of The Defenders and Jessica Jones on Netflix.
Yep.
She has also done an episode of Succession. I mean, she did the episode Prague, which is I mean, that show is critically
Yeah,
acclaimed across
big
the
show.
world. Massive show. She directed the TV miniseries Anatomy of a Scandal. And unfortunately, she did actually direct a pilot for a Game of Thrones prequel show, but that was shelved by HBO.
Yeah.
Toby, why don't you kick us off with your thoughts on the film?
Yeah, it was a film. It had actors in it, and they acted and stuff. It was. We actually don't know how to explain it without being like immediately dismissive. There's redeeming qualities to it, but all around, I don't think the criticism of the film is unwarranted. It's messy. It is my best way to, and most polite way to say it, essentially. I think the writing, and I don't want to blame any of the actors or anything like that, but given that the script was reworked, it's very apparent that it needed some more reworking, if anything.
I agree. And I should say that this is our non-spoiler thoughts. We're going to be very generic in this part, and we will get onto spoilers in another segment.
Yeah.
But at the moment, we're talking non-spoilers, and Toby's right. It is messy. It's convoluted. It's trying to be more than what it actually is, right? It's trying to be this character can see the future, and with that brings a lot of complexity in a lot of films. But in this, it doesn't. It's just, I can see the future. I can see what this person's going to do, so I'm going to run away from it, or I'm going to stop it from happening. That is essentially the film.
Yeah. So it's not one that I would necessarily like tell people to rush out and watch. In that sense, I think it's definitely one that you can watch at your house on streaming if you're unconcerned with anything remotely like comic book related. It's also like not a film that I feel like is hugely connected to any of the cinematic universes that have been set up all that much,
No,
at least as far as I could tell.
Yeah.
And that's not to say like that's a bad thing. Like we don't need to go watch a superhero film just to understand the plot of a 10 film series. But yeah, it's just not enough there to warrant, I feel like, going out of your way to film it. If it's something you're excited about, if you know the characters, like it's not going to kill you to go watch this film. And like, no. I think people walking out of it is a little bit ridiculous. Like, I don't think it was so abysmal that we couldn't sit through it.
That I actually agree with. I think people are coming out saying this is the worst film of the decade. It's the worst film of all time. Look, people are passionate about their superhero films. And obviously, if something doesn't live up to the mark, fans are going to give their thoughts. That has been the case with any superhero film where you have your critics of Civil War and critics of the original Iron Man and Infinity War and Endgame. These films are not perfect films, and people are going to make that clear. Even though, to a lot of us, the general superhero fan, they're fantastic films. With Madam Web, this is just a perfectly generic, mediocre superhero film that has a lot of terrible elements that take it down, right? It's on paper, it's a generic superhero origin story, okay? But then there are elements which we'll get into that take it from being what you would probably give a 5 or 6 out of 10 to taking it down to a 2 or 3.
Yeah.
I think one of them for me is a lot of the filmmaking elements. And I hate to say that because any film that gets made is a miracle.
Yeah.
Every day, hundreds of films are told the answer no. They can't be made. So the fact that S.J. Clarkson and the cast and crew got this film made is a miracle in and of itself, right?
Yeah.
So there needs to be something that it can offer, and it could offer a lot in terms of giving us this new superhero who can see into the future, this new band of heroes that have the potential to be something really interesting and great, but it falls flat.
Yeah, and there was potential with the casting.
There was.
Obviously, Sydney Sweeney's everywhere right now.
Yes.
So she's doing like runs in your cinemas. She was in what was the
Anyone But You?
Anyone But You.
We should say that for anyone who doesn't know what Sydney Sweeney's done before, and she is a side character in this. We'll talk about Dakota in a minute.
Yes, yeah.
But Sydney Sweeney is in Euphoria. She's just recently been in Anyone But You, which has been really successful.
Yep.
I think it just passed 150 million. I mean, that shows you that's a rom-com that's earned more than 150 million, and Madam Web, a major superhero film, is currently sitting at 52. So it just puts that into perspective. So the film leads with Dakota Johnson.
Dakota Johnson, and she's a good actress as well. She's been in some films that like are well praised. I mean, she was in the 50 Shades. There's a trilogy, I believe.
Trilogy,
yeah. Can't say I've watched them.
No.
But she was in a film that I actually really enjoyed, the Peanut Butter Falcon.
Yes. Which
is a really good film. She was fantastic in that.
Cha-Cha Real Smooth. She was in that, which is an Apple TV film. Quite an indie film, niche, but I really enjoyed it. I thought that it had a lot to offer, and Dakota Johnson was a major role in that.
Yeah. So I think there was obviously potential with the casting, but the dialogue they were given was choppy. A lot of it just like was exposition. They had chances for like dialogue, and then like we need to explain the story here, like, and that was it. That was the entire point of it. That's what it felt like. So I feel like, and this is gonna sound like more disrespectful than I mean it to be, if you cut away all the like dialogue scenes and like all the character interactions, you're left with like the foundation of something that could have worked, essentially.
As terrible as say he is right, where the actors are not bad. These are not bad actresses. These are major actresses. You got Emma Roberts. Isabella Merced was in a major film that I'm losing. She was in Transformers. I know she was in Transformers 5, but I know she's been in other films since. And she was all the characters in it were actually pretty good. All the individuals had potential. That's what is so frustrating about this film. I think I described it as frustrating more than anything.
Yeah.
Is you could see where it had a lot to give, and it didn't live up to that. It just didn't give you a lot. It didn't give you much.
No. That's what I mean. I feel like realistically, as I said, the foundation's there. The plot, very basic. Like, we're trying to keep this spoiler free. So I'm sure we'll rip into it when we get into our spoiler section.
Yeah, we'll go into a deep dive.
But yeah, there's not much substance to it, essentially.
No.
Once again, I don't think it's so terrible that you walk out. I don't think it's so terrible that like you claim it's the worst film of the like past couple of years. There's been some absolute flops in comparison. Some of the CGI worked.
Some is keywords there. Some of it did not.
Some of it did not.
Some
of the CGI worked. Some of the cinematography was okay.
I was actually going to say that there were moments of excellence in terms of cinematography, and I mean that, where I think a lot of people are going to come out and say, no, it wasn't. And we're going to get into some of the scenes that had really poor filmmaking. But I can name you an example. At one point, Dakota Johnson's character walks away from an ambulance that drives down a street. And essentially, this isn't a spoiler, but the ambulance crashes. And you see the whole thing in the background, out of focus. And it's a really well-made scene. It will require a lot of timing, a lot of effort, and S.J. Clarkson should be really proud of that shot. It is a really well-worked shot, and it requires the acting to be perfectly on time. It requires the whole stunt crew to get it perfectly right. And from what I've heard in interviews, she had one shot at it.
Yeah.
One shot. And it actually delivered a really heartbreaking scene, because there is a wider context that we won't get into, but essentially there is an emotional element to that part, and I think in retrospect it worked. That shot, that scene worked.
Yeah,
but then it goes haywire. After, and that's the problem with the film, where there's these glimpses of incredible filmmaking, but then it is bogged down by a lot of not great filmmaking, and I want to get into that, where in the opening scene there is this zoom. For some reason they decide that any time to keep the pace of the film and to keep the momentum within a scene, they keep zooming in. So, I'm sure people have seen it in shows like Succession, right, where the camera's on a character and then they say something and it zooms in.
Yeah,
right, it zooms in. They do that within an action sequence, which means you're seeing it, and then it zooms in so you can't see it.
Yeah, it's not even... I felt like that was obviously part of it, but even it was just like two characters yelling at each other, essentially, and it would zoom in, but like kind of like the, your early 2000s video cameras, where like it zooms, but then like clicks back out like another half inch, and then zooms back out, and then it swaps to the next character, does the same thing. It's just moving like in and out,
and it creates focus issues as well, because you've got a focus puller who's trying to manage what feels like a completely unpredictable shot composition and everything. It just feels like they had this scene which has a lot of tension, but it's lost because you're so distracted by what are they trying to do with this? What am I supposed to feel like I'm getting close to the characters in this moment, or am I supposed to feel scared? I don't know what I'm supposed to feel.
Yeah, and it was also like very handheld camera.
It was.
So I would say majority of the film, realistically, I felt like often it was just like even panning and stuff like that. You could tell it was handheld compared to
and handheld works in the right context.
Yeah,
handheld works when you're trying to feel raw and when you're trying to be there with the character, like you're someone standing next to them and you're trying to experience that moment. And there are moments where that works well, you know, especially when she's working as an ambulance operator.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of it also comes down to editing.
Mm-hmm.
The editing in this film was just not great. And I'm not blaming the editor. I'm not going to name it. That's not the point. The point is they clearly had a lot of things planned and then some of the shots didn't work. And so they were cutting between shots that passed as opposed to shots that actually had a lot to say.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll agree with that.
And it felt like, right, we need to justify how this person gets from here to here or this person does this.
Yeah.
And you had 20 cuts to get there.
Yeah.
For someone walking through a room, right? The one bit I thought they did really well is they have a tracking shot of Dakota Johnson as she walks through a train station. And you see individuals in the background and then it will stop following her and start following them. And it's actually quite impressive filmmaking. It's not revolutionary. We've seen it before, but it felt more familiar.
It's also good. It was good in the context because it reminded you of other characters we were following. Because the film thus far was like, you kind of got glimpses of these people, but like it was very much focused on Dakota Johnson. Then it was kind of like, oh, it was trying to push you in the direction to understand something. And that's good use of cinematography.
It is. It is.
But yeah, I think there's not a whole lot more that I want to say without going into spoilers. I'm not sure about.
I've got one more thing to say.
One more thing, go for it.
There is a heavy use of ADR in this film, which for those of you who don't know what that is, it's when they have to re-record lines that were not, that either the audio didn't quite work on set or they want to go through script rewrites. They want to change things. And as we've said before, it's already been confirmed that this film went through massive rewrites.
Yep.
There is a certain character, again, I will go into this in the spoiler section, but they clearly changed a lot of what this person was going to say. And there are times where the camera is on them and their lips do not match what they're saying blatantly. And it's things like that that take you out of what should be, again, a generic film, but even the filmmaking doesn't hold up in parts. And again, I'm not blaming S.J. Clarkson and I'm not blaming the cast and crew because the truth is, I'm sure there's a lot of studio interference. I'm sure timing was an issue. I'm sure budget was an issue. This is an immensely talented cast and crew that were given bad writing and a bad story to engage with. Okay?
Yeah, we'll have to writers then.
But I'm not. But the writers may be limit. But the thing is, the writers may be limited to what they've got the ability to do.
Oh, yeah.
Again, it is a talented group of people. These are experienced filmamakers.
Let's call it creative differences. I feel like that's the best way to describe what it.
There are creative differences.
There's like you're under circumstances as a writer. Even the cast has got their circumstances.
Yes.
Even the studios, like they got to. They're producing it. They got to. They got the money behind it.
And they have to, because some of the. I mean, there's one point they walk into a cave and you can tell that's a studio a lot in a film production company. Like there's a lot of problems with the film that come from clearly the circumstances to make it were not right. And no way says any one person's, we're not going to point someone and say the editor was bad, the director was bad, the cast were bad. No, it was bad circumstances with immensely talented people. And not every project they're going to work on works, because we've seen S.J. Clarkson work on a lot of really good projects like Succession, and even some of the Netflix shows like Jessica Jones and things like that have their fans, they're mixed reviews, but a lot of people have a lot of love for them. And the same way as a lot of people do have a lot of love for Madam Web and wanted to see her portrayed on the big screen. And if you're a fan of the character, you get to see a film that centers around this person and does give her an arc. As much as we're going to criticize it, or as we go into spoilers, her character is portrayed on screen. She gets her powers, and she does things with them. Another thing I should say is the blatant product placement.
Yes, that's not a spoiler,
but
You're going to want to buy Pepsi after.
You're going to want, or you're not going to want to buy a Pepsi afterwards, because there's even a scene where she gets a Pepsi and like she
holds onto it for like 15 minutes straight.
And
crazy.
Has the logo always perfectly facing the camera.
Yeah.
And any other drinks in this scene, which I don't know if Toby picked up, where someone's holding a beer, you never see the beer that the person's holding because clearly they want you to focus on the Pepsi in the scene.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
And I'll put it to you this way. Pepsi comes back in a major way in the conclusion of the film and essentially helps them win.
Pepsi's the real hero.
Yeah. Look, it's just distracting. That's all I'll say. There's been product placement in so many films. There was a Bond film that the entire budget of the film was covered by product placement.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not saying that was a very critically acclaimed Bond film, but what I'm saying is it can work when it wants to work. I mean, we know that was it Audi? Clearly have a major deal with MCU and that they're always driving around in the new Audi.
No, one of my favorite ones is the Transformers, where with the
Mark Wahlberg and the Bud Light.
Yes, on the back.
Yeah, where he cracks open the Bud Light in the middle of a fight scene. Yeah. So we've seen it done badly. This is just obvious.
Just distracting.
And it's just distracting because you should be interested in this awkward dynamic. At this point, Dakota Johnson's trying to figure a lot of things out.
Yeah.
And
she's clung to this Pepsi It's helping her. It's directing her in life.
You know, even in final sequences, Pepsi makes an appearance. And it's just this... It's just a bit distracting if you're not fully invested in the story, which unfortunately we weren't.
Yeah.
I think this is the perfect time to segue onto
the
spoilers.
spoiler section.
So, at this point now, if you haven't seen Madam Web or you
plan to,
we're going to get into them now.
Yeah.
But just we're sounding the spoiler alarm. We're going to get into spoilers now.
If you're looking to get our reviews, the amount of claps that we give the film, that will be at the end, of course. Again, you can skip through this section.
Yeah, we're going into spoilers now. If you don't care, feel free to continue listening. But if you do want to preserve your experience with this film, we would recommend you stop listening.
Yeah.
And because we're going to get into some heavy spoilers. Right, Toby, kick us off.
Let's just talk about the final scene. We've just been talking about Pepsi. And the big spoiler is that there's a giant neon sign of Pepsi Cola, and that saves the day, essentially. Madam Web at this point has her future predicting abilities, and the main bad guy is squashed by the P of the Pepsi sign.
We should give a name to the main bad guy. I feel like we should talk about the villain, because we didn't.
We need to talk about the villain.
His name is Ezekiel.
The specific reason I didn't talk about him in the non-spoiler section is just the script and dialogue given to this poor man.
Yeah. There is the sequence that he goes to, is it the opera or a show, and then brings a girl home from the opera who I'm assuming...
I like how he flirted as well. Like he picked something off the ground and then like went to give it to her and then pulled it away.
So it turns out, guys, that if you want to pick up a girl at a show, just pick up a magazine and give it to her, because that's how you take her home.
Yeah. And then she also didn't find it suspicious that he had a giant container in the middle of his room with a spider, a singular spider in it.
We're not talking little like daddy long legs here. We're talking like weird red spiders in the middle of his living room. That is a green flag, turns out.
Yeah. I have a lot of questions about him, and this is the parts of the plot that just kind of elude me, and perhaps there was an explanation, and I was just not caught up with it. So the start and like the major like deciding factors that lead to the plot in itself is that Dakota Johnson's, or Madam Web's mother, is in the Amazon studying spiders with this man.
Yeah. If you didn't get that from the trailer, I'm telling you now.
Yeah, just really important. And they're looking for a spider that, what did she say? Its venom could superpower your cells or something.
Superpower yourself, yeah.
Really good exposition to just basically say it's Spider-Man spider.
Basically, it's a special spider.
Yeah, it's a special spider that gives you superpowers. And then the main bad guy, what was his name? Sorry,
Ezekiel.
He has his evil plot and he ends up killing everyone after
we're in spoilers now. We can go into it. Basically, he like Madam Web can see the future, and every night he gets visions of 3 superheroes killing him.
Yeah,
in the future.
My initial issue, I've a couple, is that from the point that he stole a spider, killed a bunch of people in Amazon, he was talking about how he's dirt broke, he's got nothing to his name.
Yes.
So he got the spider and obviously gave himself superpowers, and now he's in a penthouse suite
In New York.
in New York. Where do you get the money from?
I don't know.
I'm very confused by that.
I mean, are they alluding to the fact that he's producing the spiders at home and selling them? Maybe creating more superhero, like selling them on the black market or something?
Make it. I think he only had the one
Because
spider though.
We do see that there is no, I guess that's not related, but maybe there's more spider people in this world than we know of.
Yeah, there certainly could be.
It doesn't tell you that.
It doesn't tell you that, and you're just going from like this point of like guys complaining about being so poor, and this is kind of his driving force as well. Is that he was poor and he feels like he was disadvantaged because he was poor. So
he was obsessed.
He killed people, became a crappy Spider-Man, and now he's rich. I'm just a little lost. Like,
but
what
that
happened?
is probably all the thought that was given to it. As far as
I suppose.
Feels. Maybe there was an extended cut where you go into it. I don't know. Don't you see it? But So the villain's his goal is to kill these three superheroes and save himself from the future, right?
Yes.
But obviously that doesn't happen. He gets crushed by Pepsi.
Yeah.
And Madam Web was there too.
Yeah. Well, yeah. She saw it happen before it happened,
and then it happened.
Yeah, it was impressive.
That is, I think, the biggest criticism I have, and this is where, again, I love, we want to support films and things like that, but this is the one part I couldn't wrap my head around. If you're going into this expecting Madam Web, Spider-Girl, and these other superheroes...
Spider-Girls.
Spider-Girls.
Like the Powerpuff Girls.
Exactly. These Spider-Girls to have their powers and use them in intense action sequences to kill a villain you hate. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen. They're not superheroes in this film.
No.
You don't ever see them as superheroes except for flashes into the future.
Yeah.
Of clearly another film that probably won't get made, but in the future of the Sony universe, right? You never actually see them as superheroes. The film is them running away from every battle that could exist.
Yeah, that was actually one of the things that kind of annoyed me, because I was going to be like, oh, this is like a really bad introduction to these like female leads essentially, and their superhero costumes and stuff like that. It wasn't like, you know, one of those like whitewashed like flash, like I guess flashback, not flashback, flash forward, I suppose. A vision of the future. So it was like, you know, already not as nice as like a good clear shot of them in their super suits and stuff like that. And then it was just like them doing a couple flips, kicking this guy around, and that was about the extent of it. And then I was like, oh, it's kind of a bad way to introduce what I assume will become these superheroes. They never became the superheroes in the film.
And we're not people to say, oh my God, all our superhero films need action, no story. We're not like that. We're not saying that. But what we're saying is, this is a superhero film where no one's a superhero. There isn't a superhero. Madam Web has these powers, and yes, she ends up using them. But they spend half the film creating this group of superheroes that aren't superheroes. They're people who are just trying to survive.
Yeah.
And that's great until you get to the fact that the villain dies from a collapsing Pepsi logo, right?
Yeah.
That's where the flaws lie for me, where when you think there's an arc of these people learning their powers and getting an understanding of who they are to overcome villainy, that doesn't happen. Instead, Dakota Johnson sees something happen, then it happens.
Yeah, I will say that some of the flash forward scenes were well done. I don't want to like. This is one of the things that I think is praisable. When we first see her effectively using it to save people's lives, it's to save the three main girls who she'll end up spending the majority of the film with.
Yes.
And that scene, it's brutal. You see, you see the bad guy come in. What's his name again?
Ezekiel.
Very rememberable.
Yeah.
Ezekiel, he comes in and he essentially just like snaps Sydney Sweeney's back over a chair. It is a brutal scene.
The diner scene is actually really well done, apart from the fact that apparently...
But I was talking about the train scene, the first one.
Yes.
The train scene and even the diner scene, both of them in the same sense, where it's like you basically see Dakota Johnson seeing into the future and seeing how she effectively loses to this guy.
Yeah.
How he can come in and he just basically just mogs them. Like, he's so much more powerful than them. He kills them, and it kind of like, in a sense, creates that dread of like, wow, like how these guys are, for humans, this is, a weird Spider-Man. How are they going to beat that? But then, she sees the future and can kind of just like dodge him.
Yes. which is, again, that is her character in the comics and everything. That is who she is. But I agree with you where the build-up, the suspense, S.J. Clarkson does really well. Where, especially on the train, I agree with you, where she's trying to understand what's going on around her, and there's some incredible use of sound design and editing to create that. And the fast editing and things like that work well in those sequences where you're getting flashes of what you're trying to understand it while she is.
Mm-hmm.
But then what happens. You know, they just run away, and then it's all good because I saw he was going to go there, so I'm going to go over there, and then they run away, and that's the end of the sequence, right? And basically Ezekiel spends half the film just trying to find people. That's all he is. His assistant does more work than he does.
Yeah, and with that, I think his dialogue is quite often with his assistant.
Yes,
and it is just
it's appalling. I'm sorry, it's appalling.
You're harsher than me right now.
No,
it is appalling. I'm not disagreeing with you. It's just like every single word is just like exposition, and it does. I don't know. It does feel like they were like, oh, we actually don't know what his character's doing here. Can you explain it? Like, can you just tell the audience what you're doing? And he's like, oh, I'm now hacking into the police system and telling them to not go search for the girls because they're not the actual girls. And like that's essentially how he's talking.
Yeah, because I'm sorry to be harsh, because again, I don't think these writers are bad, but what they were given didn't work. You couldn't believe anything these people were saying.
No, and
it's frustrating to say the least.
I hate to rip into this one poor fellow so much. The funniest scene for me, not the funniest one I can remember on the spot right now, is when he had taken this girl home in the bed, and he has the first vision that we see of his impending doom, essentially. And he wakes up and he just goes into like this tangent. And he's like, I see them every night. They're setting three faces. And it's just like, what are you on about, Donnie? Like, this is a girl that you just met. Why did she not run?
And what does she do? She goes, oh, really?
Yeah, she was really into it.
This is something you just brought home, and you're suddenly talking about visions of your death. And she stays in the
and
bed
then he's
for
also
too
like,
long.
and he's like, I'm going to kill them. And she's like, oh, okay. And he's like, would you not do the same? And it's like, I don't know.
And then kills her for some reason.
I don't know. It's just kind of like, I don't understand like the moral qualm that he's dealing with here, where it's just kind of like, you see your impending doom, and I understand you must say, but you're going to kill 3 girls. Like,
yeah. I mean, and the justification for that is he's evil.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, we've seen many a superhero film that does that.
Yeah.
And that's what we should say. This isn't the worst superhero film ever made. We've seen this done before. Like, it's essentially, it feels like those early 2000s when they're trying to work out how to make a superhero film, where you have Daredevil and Elektra and some of these other, the first Hulk film, where they're trying to work out the tone and the writing to make a superhero film feel real. Yeah. To bring it out from the page. And it just feels like this either went through major script rewrites, which it did, but what I'm saying is whether that dialogue existed there or whether they came up with it on the spot because they didn't know where to go with it, and they went, we need to get this across. Just say it.
Yeah, well, we won't dish too much, like, just purely on the villain, because conceptually, this film, like, the first Wonder Woman has Ares. He's the god of war. He's evil.
Absolutely.
That's it. There was, I know you loved it. What was the...
Black Adam. That film did exactly what this film does in terms of the villain to the final sequence.
Yeah, it's just
and
like...
It's poor.
He's evil. That's the explanation.
That's it. And it's frustrating in this film and other superhero films that they think they can get away with this film. We've seen it done so much better.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, now we're in the middle of superhero fatigue where you can't get away with that anymore.
No.
People are not going to go see a film that they don't feel like there's going to be an emotional or moral connection to any of the characters.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's the case here, where it takes a while for Madam Web to become likable, I think.
Where, if you do find she becomes like...
I eventually do. I do find that, where I'll give them that I think Madam Web's character, I have a lot of criticism, obviously, as we've been into in terms of the dialogue and the story, but I did see an arc there, and I did buy her transition as a character from someone who wasn't very sociable to someone who stuck to herself.
Yeah.
Stuck to herself. And don't get me wrong, the dialogue they use to give you that information is not well done.
Yeah.
But by the end of it, I believe that she cares for these teenagers, and I believe that she wants to look after them, and that she realizes her responsibility as someone with the ability to see the future and look after these people. But again, I think we should come down to the line that bothered me, I think, the most.
You love this one. You were...
This one bothered me. In the final sequence, they used the line, "With responsibility comes great power."
Whoa. That's impactful. I really felt that.
I think I've heard that before.
That was like in my core. I felt that.
I believe they've used that in Spider-Man, but they've used it to where it makes sense. Where it's with great power comes great responsibility.
I thought it was Star Wars, but no, now you say that.
Look, they decide to use the famous Spider-Man line, but I think they felt an obligation that they can't use the line. So they decided to do their spin on it.
Sure, I guess that's what you can call it. I think they just got confused. I didn't know what the line was. And
Sorry.
I'm sorry. No. I think it was just like, I mean, we've heard it in like 5 films. I think the latest Spider-Man, they changed it a little bit.
They did change it a little bit.
To try and make it, because like everyone's sick of
and I
hearing old
think the
Uncle
one
Ben.
that they used in the recent one was actually the one they used in comic books as well. Like
really?
There was that version that existed in comic books.
Okay, yeah. But yeah, this one was, once again, just like, they struggle with sentence structure, with like this exposition where it's like, she was in the forest, and then they go like, we need to have this famous Spider-Man quote, but like we want to mix it up, and so they just go like, let's chop it in half, put the first half at the back, and it didn't not make sense, to be entirely fair to him.
And what it's trying to say is right. She has this responsibility to look after the 3 people that she didn't ask for,
and that's how she gets her powers.
Actually, that's how she can see her future, and she learns. I don't want to say how to control it, because she's still very early days, and I think her capabilities, but she's able to save these people and figure herself out through her responsibilities to look after these 3 teenagers. And that's what I'm saying with, that's a praise I'll give to the film, where I did see that transition occur.
Yeah.
But the problem is, it's packed inside this dialogue that isn't engaging and isn't realistic in any way.
Yeah.
And even, I remember there was a scene where she's trying to explain the spiders to the teenagers, and she says, these spiders give you the powers, these spiders give powers to people, and there's that tribe in the Amazon.
Yes.
And they can do crazy stuff.
Yeah.
And, I mean, you're trying to engage teenagers and adults.
To be fair, I feel like if I read a book and it was like, there's people that get bitten by spiders and they're jumping around in trees and they got superhuman strength, I'd be like, they're doing some pretty crazy.
They're doing some pretty crazy stuff.
Yeah.
I agree. But again, it just doesn't...
The way that she said it wasn't as much just kind of like, that's crazy shit. Like, it was more just like, they do crazy things. And it's like...
And they're there like, really?
Yeah.
Oh my God, tell me more.
One of the things that I did really like is that the movie does also act as an introduction to CPR, if you wanted to learn it.
It actually does. Yeah. There is... Because she's an ambulance...
driver.
She's a paramedic. She's a paramedic. Yeah. And I won't lie, I thought that part was really engaging. Again, there is a scene where she's driving around the ambulance. I didn't think the editing was very good.
No.
There was, for example, she comes at an intersection, there's a yellow cab that comes, and you see the yellow cab pull up about 3 times because they use so many shots to justify that she goes around a corner. And there's just certain things like that didn't work for me.
Mm.
I think the whole goal of the editing in that sequence was to create tension and pace, where clearly the ambulance is not going at the speeds that it actually is, but the editing is trying to give you that feeling.
That impression, yeah.
That impression. Exactly right. And so I did actually think the idea of this woman being a paramedic and having a responsibility over a lot of people, but not really feeling that, as we see with her interaction with one of the patients.
Yeah.
She kind of just goes, yeah, cool, and moves on. She disassociates with that.
Yeah.
She doesn't see the responsibility that she actually has, and she learns that as she forms an emotional attachment to these teenagers.
Yeah.
And those elements of the film, I think, worked. That's why it's not an awful film to me, because there is a lot that the character had to say and a lot in terms of character development.
Yeah. It's like you have an entirely different character by the end of the film.
You do.
The arc is bumpy, we'll say
it's
that
bumpy.
much. But
and it's in
there's a direction to it at the very least.
There
is. I think that's always a good thing to see, because not like there are some films where there's character arcs that have no direction and they just don't seem to make a whole lot of sense.
I agree. And I think that Madam Web as a character, exactly what you said, has a direction, but also brings... I don't know how to put it into... brings up the other characters who don't have a lot of character development besides when they tell you their character development.
Yeah.
Almost to the camera.
Yeah.
Telling you, this is my childhood, this is why I'm sad, right? Again, that's been done before. I'm not criticizing what it's trying to do.
Yeah.
But it's the package it comes in.
Yeah.
Could have been done in so many better ways where they could have shown these characters were hurt.
Yeah.
In so many other ways, but they didn't. They decided to tell you.
I think they were
didn't have time.
trying to a little bit. So like when you first get introduced to, I'm terrible with names, so I'm not going to do any good. One of the first of the three characters, she lives downstairs from Madame Web. And she is getting talked to by the person who collects their rent. And essentially she's saying like, oh, my dad's not home right now. Like, I'll get you rent by tomorrow, or something like that.
Yes.
And that did come back up.
And that her character of all the three teenagers, I thought was the best.
And it also made sense because this is one of the things that always jabs me, and I've talked about this before, is like why not call the police in these situations? Because realistically, call the police if you're getting attacked by a crazy Spider-Man.
Yeah.
But like her dad was an illegal immigrant, and she was unaware of that. Her dad had actually been deported. Her mum had already died, so she was living by herself. And she would not actually be a legal citizen until she was 18, I believe.
Exactly, yeah.
Was why
or she'd have to go into the foster system.
Yeah, she didn't go to the foster system. So I think that was like a good explanation for like, oh, please, like, don't call the police because you're going to screw me over, like, in a sense. I don't want to speak to the whole immigration system in America because that's way too political. But my logic is always like, I'd rather like go into foster care than be killed by a crazy Spider-Man. That's what I think on the day.
I think I disagree with you a little bit. I think I know what you're saying, but I think the film was basically trying to say that for teenagers who've had rough childhoods or don't have parents, the system is failing them.
No, the system
they need support and nurturing, and that's what Madame Web offers.
Yes.
And I think that's where the transition of Madame Web's character becomes, because she essentially becomes a mother to them.
Yeah, no, and I'm not saying that's a bad like manner to push the police away from the story. And I think there was a horror film I was watching recently that did a very similar thing. I forget what it's called. I think it's like No One Gets Out Alive or something like that. On Netflix. I haven't finished it yet. But it's a very similar thing where like it's this girl who's basically just in like a haunted, cheap piss rental place. And one of the reasons she doesn't want to call the police is because she's an illegal immigrant.
Yeah.
So like in that sense, it can be done really well to like keep them locked into the story without the external force that the police offers in that sense. Which is, always a good thing. So I'm not like saying it's, it doesn't make sense for her to not want to call the police and rather, run for her life. But it's just a way that they do it, and I don't dislike it. I think that's good. No. And it's also good that it's foreshadowed.
I mean, for me personally, I didn't think it fully worked. I felt myself less engaged because it was a lot of telling and not showing.
So yeah, I think that was part of the issue.
But I think what they were trying to do was really good. That's what I mean. There is a structure that is there, and there is clearly great ideas within a package that is unfortunately really disappointing. And we should say, we don't blame the cast and crew. Any film getting made is a miracle. But unfortunately, this film did not work for us.
Yeah.
I don't think it worked for a lot of people. But it doesn't mean I'd hate to see Sony can develop this any further or whatever it is. We're not saying that. What we're saying is this film within this package didn't work for us. I am still very interested to see what S.J. Clarkson goes on to do, because we've seen her do some really great work. Obviously, Dakota Johnson, Sydney Sweeney, the other characters in this, Adam Scott as well. They've been in some incredible productions, and I think their characters have the roots to be really interesting in the future. But unfortunately, this film didn't work.
No.
Shall we go into our final thoughts and what our rating is?
Why don't you go first for this one?
So, look, I think for me, there were some qualities that worked.
Yeah.
I thought Madame Web was interesting, and I thought there were certain sequences, such as the visions, that were quite well done in terms of sound design and filmmaking.
Yeah.
And some of the action sequences, including the diner and the train, worked well. Were well shot and were quite interesting. Unfortunately, I think that's all I could give it credit for.
Yes.
I thought, and I'm not saying the actors are bad, but what I'm saying, I think the acting within it, due to the dialogue and the context of the story, wasn't great. It was poor. I think a lot of the action sequences were poorly shot. I think the story had a lot of flaws, and the dialogue was sometimes humorous in a story that should be quite
serious.
And serious. Yeah. So unfortunately, this film didn't work for me. I'm going to give it 3 claps.
3 claps?
3 claps.
You gonna clap for that one?
I'm not going to clap for that one. I give it 3 claps, and I should say a lot of people are going to go to either one extreme. It's a below average film.
Yeah.
But it wasn't. I wasn't at any point thinking I want to walk out.
Yeah.
But I didn't necessarily love every minute of the film.
Yeah.
There were a lot of times I was rolling my eyes. There was a lot of times I thought, can we move on? Because we could see where it's going. But it offered enough in terms of visuals and sound design in certain moments to keep me engaged. And I did want to see where Madam Web ended up.
Yeah.
So for that reason, I give it 3. I think it could easily, on a rewatch, become a 2, or on a rewatch could become a 4. I don't know. But I think at the moment, coming out of the cinema, it was a 3.
Yeah, it's for myself, especially the last thing you said there, upon rewatch, I think it just get worse. I think
so?
I think the only thing clinging me to that film was the idea of like maybe something's going to happen. I think one of the things that dragged me through, especially at the start, was like the idea that we're going to get to see these people suit up, fight the bad guy, and that was like exciting for me. I was really keen to see these actors who I know are fantastic get into their roles and do some stunts and stuff like that. That was exciting to me, especially with the plot and dialogue not driving me a whole lot. So upon rewatch, where I know that doesn't really happen, it's going. I don't think it's a film that I'm going to be able to rewatch realistically, and I think that's along with all the reasons as you've said, the redeemable factors. It's not a terrible film that I had to walk out of, which is what I would give a 1, but it's not a film that I'm rewatching. It's not a film that I particularly thought was fantastic. For me, therefore, it is 2 claps.
2 claps.
Yeah.
All right. I totally understand that. I think it is worth mentioning before we wrap up that there are minor connections to the Spider-Man universe. Ben Parker, who is Uncle Ben, as we know and love, with great power comes great responsibility, Uncle Ben. He is actually Madam Web's best friend, I would say, or partners at least. He is he's a paramedic. And his sister is Mary, who is Peter Parker's mother, and she is pregnant with him in the film.
And gives birth by the end of it, we have to imagine. She goes
Peter
into
Parker
labor
in the film.
Yeah.
And essentially Madam Web in a scene saves Peter Parker. She's pregnant, and Madam Web saves Peter Parker. And whilst I thought it was strange and unnecessary, I also thought it added a little bit of intrigue to certain scenes where I'm going, I wonder how this is going to play a factor in the future. Yeah. And again, I'm not one of those people that say everything needs to be connected, but I think it's an interesting choice for them to even mention them, given the fact that Venom, Morbius do not have a lot of close tie-ins other than little cameos and little snippets here and there of, Spider-Man on a building or whatever.
I get that.
But I think it was worth mentioning that for those of you who maybe didn't understand it, because we had to discuss it afterwards to fully engage with it, that Ben Parker is in the film and Peter Parker is the baby that's born at the end.
Yeah.
So we'd like to thank you for listening to our thoughts on Madam Web.
Yep.
We absolutely do not want to be known as a podcast that just hates on film.
No, certainly not.
We don't, but we do want to give you our honest thoughts on film, and we do want to continue to support the filmmakers involved and want to see where they go in the future.
Yeah.
We'd ultimately recommend that maybe you don't go to the movies to see this one, unless you're really a fan of the Sony universe and superheroes.
Yep.
As a whole, I wouldn't really recommend you see this film.
No, I don't think it's one that, if it's a film that like you can put on the background while you do something, I don't think it's going to be detrimental in that sense. And it's not one that you have to like watch all that particularly intensely to understand the plot. You can come back and forth and be like, oh, she's here now. Cool.
You can.
And I think that's fine. So yeah, I'm not saying rush to cinemas to watch it. If you really enjoy the characters, you really enjoy superheroes, go see it perhaps.
It's a new superhero. It's not a sequel.
No.
It's not a remake of something.
Exactly.
It is a new character. And again, that character is interesting.
Yep.
It's just unfortunately not in the best package.
No, exactly.
Thank you very much for listening to episode 2 of The Clap. We appreciate all your support as always. We can't wait to give you more. In the future, we're going to be looking at Denis Villeneuve for June, but we're also going to be checking out some new films that are releasing in the month of March.
Yep, I think also we are going to be splitting episodes now. Is that right? So we're going to have this episode where it's just news, and then our review of a movie that we've seen for the week, and then we're going to do like a 2.5 episode where we talk specifically about our singular creator. This week we're talking about Donald Glover, renowned artist Childish Gambino. He also works as a writer, director, and actor in a lot of films and TV shows, particularly Atlanta, which is he's well known for, but more recently Mr. and Mrs. Smith. So if you want to hear about his life, essentially, and how he got into the creative field, we will be talking about that in another episode and giving our review on the latest Mr. and Mrs. Smith as well.
We will be. And as always, if you want to reach out to us, we have our email associated with the podcast. You can listen to us anywhere you get your podcasts, and feel free to send us some inquiries or feedback, or if there's anything you'd love to hear us talk about. And of course, please share us with your friends, with your family. Let the Clap podcast be known. We'd love to keep building our profile, and we can't wait to continue doing this in the future. So thank you very much for listening to episode 2 of the show, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thank you very much.
See ya.